Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Harwan Islamic Study Circle, HISC Seerah session on 115 that we're doing on Prophet Salam's life, the greatest story ever told. So the last 12 sessions we did on the Battle of Uhud, culminating last week in the lessons of the Battle of Uhud as mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an. And probably Uhud is the single most event that's going to take the longest time for us to do in the Seerah. I think most of the other events that we're doing, even some of the other major battles, aren't going to take half as long as Uhud. But alhamdulillah, we're looking at the issues subsequent to Uhud. So I'm not going to recap on the Battle of Uhud or on the Quranic verses related to that. So essentially, following the Battle of Uhud, much like after the Battle of Badr, where the Muslims were in the ascendancy, now there is a perception that the Muslims have already peaked and they're on the downward incline now. And because of that, you get a realignment of the politics surrounding Medina, whereas before, because of the monumental victory of Badr, there was a huge political capital that the Muslims played on. Now, because of the seeming defeat, and that's certainly how the issue was spun. And we talked about how immediately after the battle, the propaganda went in overdrive on both sides to try and spin the events to their advantage. But certainly following the Battle of Uhud, there was a perception in and around Medina and Mecca that the Muslims had been quite badly done and humiliated. And then on the back of that, what we got was specifically some of the other elements, and certainly those elements that were against the Muslims, that were antagonistic towards the Muslims. We got them rearing their head more openly, more blatantly. So not just the munafiqeen within Medina, not just some of the Jewish tribes, but also some of the Bedouins around Medina, the tribes. They were able to express their enmity towards the Muslims in a more forthright way, which they hadn't been able to do that before. And there seems to be a growing coalescence of some of these groups to provide that existential threat to the Muslims. So whereas the Battle of Badr the Muslims were able to project themselves significantly following that, now we got a sense that the Muslims are on the defensive, and so as a result of that, there is a whole new threat that's potentially happening to them. So and so we see that over the coming sessions. We'll talk about some of these other threats that happened upon the Muslims. And again, is this directly correlated to the sense of defeat of the Muslims following the Battle of Uhud? One of these sort of minor incidences was that the fact that after Uhud, Banu Asad bin Khuzaymah, they were planning to attack the Muslims. So they're taking advantage of the fact that the Muslims have been defeated, and there's a sense that actually now is the right time to attack Medina and to take some spoils and to really be in that significantly sort of a positive position towards the people of Medina. And again, different tribes will want to have their own different pieces of the pie. So Banu Asad, they were planning a mission. So they were gathering people. They were sending out the word covertly to gather an army to actually attack Medina. So the intelligence corps of the Muslim network, excuse me, The Muslim networks of spies essentially got wind of this, and the intel was that Talhah and Salamah, sons of Khuwailid, they were going around asking for volunteers to fight the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. So whilst they were still in the stage of sounding out different tribes to see if they are amenable to attack the Muslims, the Prophet ﷺ, he immediately dispatched 150 troops, a small platoon of Muhajir and Ansar, headed by Abu Salamah. So Abu Salamah in charge of 150 men, and they would basically launch a surprise counter-offensive against the Banu Asad, and that basically worked. These people, the Abu Salamah, he went. And they surprised attacked Banu Asad in Banu Asad's own homeland. They sort of neutralized their attempts at gathering a force. The sort of nascent army was dispersed, and the Muslims were able to capture lots of cattle as part of that expedition. So that essentially is one of those expeditions which was nipped in the bud, quite literally. However, Abu Salamah, he was previously injured in the Battle of Uhud, and then he was healing from that, and he was appointed by the Prophet ﷺ to lead this particular expedition. But the previous wound from Uhud, that essentially re-erupted, and as a result of that, he unfortunately died soon after this expedition as a result of that wound originally from Uhud. And then we'll come on to Abu Salamah's legacy a bit later on in a few weeks' time, inshallah, or a couple of weeks. Then there's another interesting sort of story that's mentioned in the books of Seerah, and that's the decapitation event of Abdullah bin Unais. Now, decapitation in terms of its a military stratagem. So what essentially happened is that Khalid bin Sufyan al-Hudhali, he, like we talked about Banu Asad, so Khalid bin Sufyan al-Hudhali, he was likewise in the desert area, gathering lots of people to raid the Muslims again. So again, he's a fearsome fighter with quite a good pedigree and reputation. So he is sounding out some of the other Bedouin tribes to see, look, okay, the Muslims are at the weakest, let's go and attack. So the Prophet ﷺ, again, he finds out about this, whether it's through his intel or direct from Jibril. He finds that Khalid bin Sufyan, he's at such and such a place, and he's gathering the troops. So he specifically requests and asks for Abdullah bin Unais, and he dispatches him with specific instructions, essentially to kill, get rid of, sort out Khalid bin Sufyan, because Khalid, as we said, is a fighter of pedigree and has a big reputation. And so the idea was, if you take out the leader like Khalid, the group is motivated by his personality. So by taking him out of the equation, it's likely that any attempt will fall by the wayside, which is exactly what happened. So Abdullah bin Unais, he's given this specific task by the Prophet ﷺ. And so the Prophet ﷺ calls him privately and says, look, this is your mission. Doesn't give him the option should you seek to accept it. He just said, this is your mission. So Abdullah bin Unais says, look, how will I know it's him, and where do I find him? So Prophet says, you'll find him in the valley of Aruna. And Abdullah says, well, what does he look like? And again, neither Abdullah nor the Prophet ﷺ have probably seen Khalid, but obviously Jibril's given a certain description to the Prophet ﷺ, or this was one of the sort of mini miracles of the Prophet ﷺ. So Prophet ﷺ, he says to Abdullah, when you see him, you will be more than terrified. A shiver will go down your spine. And Abdullah says, look, I'm not the type of guy who is easily flustered. It doesn't happen to me. I don't get scared of anyone. But the Prophet says, you'll see him, you will feel scared. That's how you know who this person is. And told him, you need to go in this specific place. So Abdullah, he takes his sword, goes out on this mission. He heads towards the valley of Aruna. And so Abdullah then he's recounting this in the first person. He goes, "Look, when I saw him firsthand, and I'm not the type of person to be scared of anyone, I immediately felt a bit terrified, and I said, Allah and His Messenger have spoken the truth." So he instantly knew who Khalid was. And then the other interesting thing that we learn on this mission is that he's saying, look, he was eager to get there as soon as he can, but when he got there, it was Asr time, and then he saw Khalid in the distance, but it's Asr time. He needs to pray. He can't get the Musalla out and put it down and pray, because it's obvious people are going to know he's a Muslim. So he then does ijtihad and decides to pray covertly. So and then he describes this. He says, look, I was worried that the time for prayer, Asr, would go, and especially if I would engage Khalid in fight, I don't know how long it's going to last, and I might miss my prayer. So he goes, because I was scared of that, he says he prayed as he was walking, and that he would make gestures with his head as he walked. And again, so this is documented as the first occasion that a prayer of this type had happened. And some scholars then refer to this as one of the ways of doing Salat al-Khawf. So you can't pray as you are like that. So as I said, so he's praying as he's walking along. So then what he does is he goes up and he meets Khalid and says, basically tries to endear himself towards Khalid. And so he's saying, look, I hear you gathering troops. And Khalid says, well, who are you? He goes, look, I'm just a Bedouin, and I'm looking to, share in the fight against Muhammad. And so they're chatting, and he sort of, makes Khalid quite at ease in his presence. So they're just sort of chatting for a while, and then at the right moment, maybe some minutes or hours later, Abdullah says basically, he caught him off guard and basically killed him in front of, or he killed him and left him surrounded by his women folk who were crying. So at this point in time, it's one of the narrations is that he's Khalid bin Sufyan. He's looking for somewhere where he can put the tent up for his women folk who are accompanying him, and whilst he's doing that, Abdullah manages to kill him. And then in the commotion, all the ladies, they get upset and they're crying, obviously, and Abdullah basically walks out of there. And much as the Prophet ﷺ predicted, the battle fizzled out, so there was no one else able to gather the troops. So then, when Abdullah bin Unais, he goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet sees him, and he's quite joyous and says, may this face be that of victory. And Abdullah explains what happened, and then the Prophet gave him a stick or a staff. So Abdullah took the stick off the Prophet went back home, and then his people asked him, why did the Prophet give you the stick? And Abdullah goes, I don't know, I just, he gave it to me, I took it. And they goes, well, you need to go back and ask the Prophet why he gave you the stick. So then Abdullah, he goes back, and again, it just shows the level of deference that people had to the Prophet. He gives them the stick, he just takes it. So he goes and asks the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, why did you give me this stick? As the Prophet says, look, this will be a sign on the day of judgment for me to recognize you. And on that day, very few people will have anything to lean on, whether that's sort of good deeds or something else. It's left open, but basically this is a sign for the Prophet on the day of judgment. And so then essentially, as you'd expect, Abdullah, he carried that stick with him everywhere he went. And then in his will, he said, he wants to be buried with the stick in his shroud, which is obviously what happened. So again, the Prophet he chose the right man for the right task in the right location, went and he did it. And the other thing we can learn is that obviously the Sahabi of the Prophet they would make ijtihads, the technical term. So they would infer new rulings from existing core rulings in Islam. And the Prophet oftentimes he would agree with the legal opinion, the ijtihad done by his Sahabi, or he might just modify it or adapt it. But again, it shows that this was a practice that did happen. Obviously, they've got clear access to the Prophet. So generally, if there was a question that arose, before they would go about and fulfill that, they would first go back and ask the Prophet. Seldom was there the need to act there and then, and there was no access to the Prophet. So in this situation, that was exactly it. There was no access to the Prophet because he's out on the battlefield, and he would expose himself as one of the enemy. Therefore, he had to extrapolate a legal opinion based on what he knew at that point in time. And again, that's an important lesson for us. If we can put something off, there's not always the occasion where we have to act there and then. If we can put something off and get the right opinion, that's what we should do. We should ask the people of knowledge, and that's time and time again in the Qur'an. It's not, it's not do something and then justify it post hoc. We should try to, before the situation arises, do what is best. So that's a couple of minor incidences that happened. The next one that we'll talk about, actually I wanted to talk about Raji as well as Bir Ma'una, but I'm not sure I'll get on to Bir Ma'una. But anyway, the next thing that happened was the event at Raji. Now this is in the 4th year of Hijrah. We had a delegation from a couple of tribes called Udal and Qarah. So these tribes came to the Prophet and they came to Medina, and they asked the Prophet specifically to send a group of Sahabi to their tribes so that they can learn Islam. And they said that, look, we've got some Muslims amongst us, come and teach them Islam. So when obviously the outside tribes they come to the Prophet and they're asking for help, and the nature of the Prophet ﷺ is obviously to do da'wah and to spread Islam. He obviously acquiesced to that. So then he sent, it said, 10 people to these tribes to do da'wah. And again, we have to put this into context where Musab ibn Umair was sent after the first pledge of Aqaba to Yathrib at the time, and he managed to do a fantastic job. And within a year, it said that Islam had entered every house. And then on the back of that, you got the second pledge of Aqaba, and then the migration. So these things have been done, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's thinking about, now that they've firmly established the Islamic State, it's got, it's recognized, it's got its own function. It's now time to actively start spreading Islam in different ways, so not just in the military conquests, in doing these specific dawah to these different areas, especially upon invitation. So he appointed Murthid bin Abi Murthid al-Ghanawi as the chief of the 10. So again, when the Prophet said, when you set out as a group, you should always appoint an emir. So Murthid, he was appointed as the emir. Another version says it was Asim bin Thabit who was appointed as the emir. So the 10, they set out for the purposes of the dawah. They got to a place between Rabi' and Jeddah called Ar-Raji. Okay, and then as soon as they got to this place, Ar-Raji, they encountered 100 or so archers of Banu Lihyan. Okay, so the Banu Lihyan tribe, they surrounded them with 100 archers, and they started attacking them. So these 10 Muslims realized that this is an ambush, this is a setup. So coming under arrow fire of 100 archers, they ran up and took some took defensive positions on some higher ground called Fudfud, and then they're trying. The 10 of them, lightly equipped, they're trying to defend themselves, and then the Bedouins they're charging them with their arrows. So then discussions are happening, and these Bedouins, they are basically saying, look, come down, we're not going to hurt you, we're not going to harm you. And Asim bin Thabit, he doesn't trust them. He said, look, these guys are not to be trusted. I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to surrender. I'm going to fight. So he refused to go down, and many of the others, likewise, they fought to defend themselves, and in the end, Asim and 6 others were killed. So you only had 3 of them left. Again, they're grossly outnumbered. There's 100 to 10 of them. So Asim bin Thabit, he was well known, and there was he'd killed a prominent person in the Battle of Uhud, and there was essentially a bounty on his head, quite literally. A lady called Sulafa from Makkah, she was a mushrik, a pagan. She had made a pledge, and this was widely known at the time. She'd given a pledge that she wants to drink wine from the skull of Asim bin Thabit. And Asim obviously knew this as well. And this is one of the factors why he didn't want to surrender. And she's this Thalatha, she said, anyone who brings me the skull of Asim, I will give 100 camels. And like we said before, 100 camels is a small fortune. Asim, before he, as he's fighting, he says, "Oh Allah, inform our Prophet ﷺ about us, and that we were sincere, and that we didn't die as cowards, and as I protected your religion in the daytime, protect my body at night." So his arrows are running out, and he's fighting with his spear. His spear is getting blunted and dulled. He knows it's just a matter of time. So he's making a special dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say, look, just let the Prophet know that we were sincere. We came we came wholeheartedly to do dawah. We were ambushed. We didn't die as cowards. We didn't run away. And as Asim was one of those who was spread Islam, he says in the daytime, he said, look, I'm going to die. Please look after my body at night. So Asim was eventually killed, and then these archers obviously know who Asim is, so they make a beeline for his body, because they want to get the booty, 100 camels. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the dua of Asim, he sends a swarm of wasps or hornets, okay, so to protect the dead body. So Asim's died, and then Allah sends covers the body essentially with these wasps. So whenever someone goes near to try and get the body, they get fended off by these wasps. So again, this is a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the army's arguing because they've killed 7 of them. There's 3 left who we'll talk about in a second, and so they're arguing, well, what should we do? That body's worth 100 camels. So they know they can't go near it. So then they say, well, let's wait till night time, and then the wasps will disperse, and then we'll be able to collect the body. So they just play the waiting game, and so gets dark, and then again, and another amazing thing is that water gushes forth from the mountainside, and this water then flows uphill, gathers the body of Asim on the top of the hill, and takes the body away. So this, the water from out of nowhere gushes out of the mountainside, goes up the hill, washes the body of Asim, and takes it away. And then obviously no one knows where Allah took the body, but it had gone. And and then when Umar ibn al-Khattab heard of this, he exclaimed, Allah verily protects his believing slaves after death, just as he does during their lifespan. And not just the miracle in itself of the bees, the wasps, and the river, but I just love the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have just made the body disappear, puff of smoke, and it's gone. But the beautiful thing is, he wants people to see his miracles in action, and again to then increase our glorification of him through that. So the dua has been made, and so he responds to that in a visible way. So you can see the wasps, and you can see the river come out, get the body and take it away. So these miracles are there. And they're fantastic. So then what happened to the other 3? So the 3 of the 10 people who went originally to Dawah, there's someone called Khubaib bin Arat, Zayd bin Abdathna, and Abdullah ibn Tariq. So these three are left, and these sort of 100 archers or so, we don't know if any of them were killed or not. These 100 also Bedouins, they're again saying to these remaining three, look, promise you nothing's going to happen to you, we'll look after you, you're guaranteed safety, just come down from the hill, and we're not going to harm you. And so the three of them, okay, fair enough, says, okay, fine. So they come down the hill, and as soon as they get to the bottom of the hill, the archers, the Bedouins, they pounce on them, and they tie them up as animals, right? As they tie up animals, and they start taking them like that. And then one of them, he says, look, these guys are not sincere. They're not good. They've not got any good intentions. So I'm just going to stay here. I'm not going to budge. So he sits down on the roadside and refuses to move. So the Bedouins, they're trying to get them to move, but Abdullah bin Tariq says, look, no, you guys are insincere, and they can't move them. They're not going to be able to. The most prizeworthy person was Asim bin Thabit, but now they've got these three others. They're going to try and sell them into slavery, or if ransom them. So then Abdullah's not moving, so they just basically kill him on the roadside. So he becomes shaheed from that. So then there's Khubaib and Zayd who are left. So first of those, Khubaib, they keep him so that they can crucify him, essentially give him a slow and painful death. So he's taken to a holy sanctuary, Tanim, for crucifixion. And then there's a big show is going to be made out of that. And then so before he's crucified, Khubaib, he said, look, can I please pray 2 rakah prayer? And also he asks for a razor to sort of clean himself and to do ghusl and shower. So Khubaib, as he's a prisoner with Banu Harith, he it's his last rites essentially. Give me a shower, give me a razor so I can clean my hair, not just facial hair, but obviously the other body parts, because he basically wants to meet Allah clean. So and then there's a famous story where he's got the razor in his hand. And then there's a little baby that crawls up to him, and then the mother of the baby, she freaks out because she sees the razor in Khubaib's hand, and the baby basically sitting in the lap of Khubaib. So she freaks out, saying, "Oh my gosh, my baby, my baby, my baby!" So Khubaib, he's quite dumbfounded, and he's quite taken aback at the attitude of this lady, and he goes, look, do you honestly think I'm going to do anything to the baby? And it's narrated, he says, are you scared that I will kill this child? Wallahi, I will never do something like this. Okay, so he's basically saying, look, this is not what Muslims do. This is not the way of things. I mean, some people might think that in that desperate situation, he's about to die. He's literally he's about to have his last rites read to him. He's going to be executed. He might as well take down as many people as he can, and that's the attitude some people have. And if he was dishonourable, that might have been the case. Inflict as much damage, better to burn out than to fade away. So go out with a bang. But Khubaib, doing dawah to this, at ladies. That's not what we're about as Muslims. This is, we don't harm the innocents like that. And that mother later on, she recounts that, wallahi, Khubaib, she's never seen a prisoner like that before. He was the most noble person she's ever seen. He had the best mannerisms, and then she says, "Look, I saw him tied up. He's a prisoner, right? About to be executed. I saw him tied up, yet he was eating grapes in Makkah when there were no grapes around." And obviously, the angels have been coming and supporting Khubaib, because there's no Geneva Conventions. They're not treating the prisoners well. They've bought these prisoners of these Bedouins, in order to do harm. So they're not obviously going to look after them either. So because of that, again, she says, look, there were no grapes or anything like that, yet I saw him with my own eyes eating these grapes, and it's out of season. And we've seen that before in some of the other stories of the other Sahabis, those that were imprisoned or in dungeons. They were eating of the grapes that were provided to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the angels. And again, we see that in the Qur'an as well, where Maryam, she would often have fruit in her chamber in Baitul Maqdis, out of season. When I say out of season, so it's not, not around at the time. So then, Khubaib, he's the first one to pray 2 rakah before execution. And again, this then became a sunnah. This was sort of, accepted by the Prophet ﷺ, as I suppose you could say bid'ah hasana, but it was endorsed by the Prophet ﷺ. And people would then, before execution, pray these 2 rakah. And Khubaib says, look, that I kept these 2 rakah short because I didn't want to give the impression I was scared of death. Otherwise my heart wanted to pray a long rakah, but obviously I didn't want to give the impression that I'm scared of death. And then there's it's narrated in the books that he wrote some poetry, or recited some poetry, around this, and I'll just quickly read that again. It's nice just to, it's better in Arabic, obviously, no doubt, but in translation, it's nice just to get a sense of how these people were thinking in this time. So the translation is: the Confederates have gathered and their tribes around me, or the alliances have gathered their tribes around me and summoned all of them who could come. They've gathered their women, their children, and I am bound fastly to a lofty trunk. To Allah alone I complain of my helplessness and sufferings, and of the death the alliance have prepared for me. O Lord of the throne, give me endurance against their design. They have cut my flesh bit by bit, and I've been deprived of sustenance and food. They let me choose infidelity, but death is preferable. Tears roll out of my eyes, though not of fear. By Allah, I fear if I die a Muslim. I fear not if I die a Muslim. On what side I fall for the sake of Allah. I will not show subservience to the enemy if the Lord so desires. He will bless my torn limbs and my broken joints. And there's that famous narration of Abu Sufyan, occurred here. Some say it is with when he's talking to Khubaib. Others say it is the other prisoner, Sufyan bin Umayyah, purchased the second prisoner, Zayd. But this conversation, and you can see the torment that Khubaib's been going through. And Abu Sufyan, he, through this torture and crucifixion, he now turns to Khubaib and basically says, look, honestly, really tell me in all truthfulness, right? I adjure you by Allah, don't you wish that Muhammad were here in your place so that we might cut off his head and that you were with your family? So basically saying, look, don't you want to swap places? You know, we're doing this because we want to get rid of the Prophet. Don't you think he should be in this position? And again, Khubaib then responded, by Allah, I do not wish that Muhammad were in the place that I occupy, or that a thorn could hurt him whilst I was sitting with my family. Again, we've all heard that phrase before. Basically saying, look, I would rather be in this stage of impending doom, pain, and suffering than for the Prophet ﷺ to be hurt by a pinprick or a thorn prick, right? And at that, Abu Sufyan, again, he's a non-Muslim at the time, and he's the chief of the senior most chief of the Quraysh. So he turns around and in amazement, and he says, look, never have I seen a people who love their leader as the followers of Muhammad. Okay, so it's an obvious fact, right? But again, here you have even the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims having to admit that the quality of love, discipline, affection, and obedience to the Prophet ﷺ is second to none. Right? They're not going to get that any other tribal leader. Yeah. And again, Abu Sufyan, he's they basically they've made this a bank holiday where all of Makkah is turned out for the crucifixion, for the torture, for the ritual humiliation of these two prisoners. Okay, so one of them was killed on the roadside, and the other one, Khubaib and Zayd bin Dathna. The big show is made of their execution, and again, it is trying to help the non-Muslims deal with their situation, and it was Safwan ibn Umayyah who killed Zayd as an act of vengeance for his father's murder. So a final couple of things. I don't think, as I say, I'll be able to talk about the tragedy of Bir Ma'una, but just a couple of things that we can learn from this finally is that in those situations, and may Allah protect us from being in that situation, where we're captured on the battlefield or in treacherous circumstances. It is from the actions of the people left, it's permissible both to fight back and it's permissible to surrender. So both things were done, and both things the Prophet allowed. So it doesn't say that in every situation you have to fight or that you have to surrender. Both are permissible. And again, where they killed Abdullah ibn Thabit on the roadside, he knew by refusing to budge, that he was going to be killed, right? But that's not considered suicide. That's essentially, because he's killed by the enemy, even though he knows his actions are likely to lead to his death, it's still not considered suicide because that's not the niyyah. Okay, so if your death is caused by someone else outside of your control, it's just not suicide. That even though you may know that you're going to be tortured and die. And again, like we've said before, oftentimes the people on the front row of an advancing army know that there's pretty high probability that they are going to die, but that's not considered suicide so long as they're They're fighting for the intention, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the intention of dying a coward's death. And again, Allah looks after His own, and so you've got the karma of the Khubaib eating the grapes, and the karma separate to mu'jiza, which are miracles that are given to the prophets. And again, as we said, it's not allowed from a Shari point of view for Muslims, even in that situation, to kill innocent people. This is not the battlefield he's captured, but there's still etiquette around how Muslims live their life. And again, it's we don't go around killing women and children and elderly people like that. So that's an important thing. And finally, and a good place to stop is the absolute love and devotion of the Sahabi, even in extremists, towards the Prophet ﷺ, right? And they were able to exhibit that love, firsthand there. We're not in that situation, but whenever a situation arises where we are able to defend the honor of the Prophet ﷺ or the Muslims, we should avail that, and too often than not we sort of step back from that, but actually that's our challenge in order for us to defend the lies, the propaganda, the slander against our Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. We still have the ability to do that. But again, we see examples of the love and devotion of the Sahabi, and may Allah make us of those people who love the Prophet ﷺ to that intensity as the first generation, inshallah. Anyway, I'll finish there. It's going to be Maghrib very, very soon, although I doubt if I'll hear the adhan here. It's one thing that I miss. But anyway, do remember us in your du'as, and inshallah catch up soon. And next week, as I say, we'll do Bir Ma'una and a couple of other minor incidents that lead up to the expulsion of Banu Nadir. So I'll finish there, inshallah. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.